that lasted for a year. I talked for hours into a tape, to tape recorder, you know, the kind that go like this. And we interviewed family and other internees and researched the libraries. The months spent delving into those 3 years of my childhood and its aftermath was as powerfully therapeutic as years with a psychiatrist, and a lot cheaper. We found there were already 40 books written on the internment, but they were mostly academic and political. We found no personal stories from internees themselves that addressed the emotional and psychological damage of that experience. Not only was there the cultural attitude, shikatakanai, it's over and can't be helped. The phenomenon of post-traumatic stress syndrome, unknown 30 years ago, had silenced most internees. Today we know how the experience of death, divorce, sexual abuse, and parental alcoholism can remain buried in the subconscious until the memory resurfaces years later, and it usually is about 20 or 30 years. For many internees, the original shocks of loss, family upheaval, and, quote, guilt were suppressed for many years. I realized the feeling I carried about the incarceration was one of deep humiliation, like a person who had been raped. You are the victim, yet you are sullied by that experience, ashamed to draw attention to it. For years, I felt guilty for the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Somehow, I was responsible for that infamous event. When I asked my mother, why are we in this prison camp? I was then too young to understand war and politics. She said, it's because we are Japanese. She didn't say anything about a war with Japan. So in my mind, it was not only bad to be Japanese, it was criminal. Feeling guilty for the bombing of Pearl Harbor is similar to the feeling many Americans have for the atomic blast over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Thus, crimes of a government can become, quote, sins of the people, and especially in the mind of an innocent child. Like the Vietnam vets, it took from 20 to 30 years for the defenses to wear down. The time had come for a communal catharsis, a healing for the Japanese American community and also for the United States. Spurred by diligent young Sansei lawyers, the struggle for justice culminated in the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, which apologized for the government's actions and offered monetary compensation to survivors of the camp. This victory was not for Japanese Americans alone. It was a great victory for all Americans, because the internment was an important American issue, not just a Japanese American one. For the first time in the history of this country, in 1943, too, all three branches of our government violated the Constitution, the highest law of the land. The Civil Liberties Act proved our Constitution is not just a piece of parchment under glass in the National Archives. It is a living, vital contract that binds us all together as Americans. And if that contract is broken, as it was in 1942, it is not just the rights of individuals that are threatened, but the very fabric of this democratic nation. Today, there are all too many politicians and irresponsible media who find scapegoats to blame for the country's problems. And more, it seems, those scapegoats are immigrants. How often do we hear, they are different from us, have no idea of democracy and freedom. They don't speak our language. How many of us who lived through the racism and incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II remember what it was like to have those very words directed against one innocent group? But today we should know better. We have the shoulders of Martin Luther King and others to stand upon. Our consciousness has changed, and because of this, our task is greater. For now we are in a partnership, a complex relationship where we must learn about each other. No longer do we live in the simplistic structure of one group authoritatively dominating others. And with those words, I'm going to stop now and open for questions and discussion, and I hope you have a lot, because that is really the most exciting and dynamic part of this presentation. Thank you very much.